My name is Jessie Griffin, and I'm 31 years old. And if I'm being honest, I should have seen it coming long before adulthood ever arrived to confirm it. Some families divide love evenly, others at least pretend to. Mine never bothered with pretending. Growing up, I wasn't the spare or the backup. I wasn't even the shadow. I was the extra the napkin no one asked for, folded neatly at the edge of a table that already felt full without me. My younger sister, Lena Griffin, is 29, 2 years behind me, but somehow always treated as if she were the glowing, golden eldest. The daughter who could do no wrong, the one whose baby pictures were printed on glossy paper and framed in gold. My mother had shelves dedicated to Lena, track trophies, ballet ribbons, debate medals, carefully labeled, memory boxes, framed. Acceptance letter to her prestigious university, even a custom painting of her at 16. Meanwhile, anything with my face on it was stuffed into a dusty shoebox under the stairs, next to old extension cords and a winter wreath no one used anymore. I used to joke that if I ever went missing, they'd have to guess what I looked like from a yearbook someone else kept. But it wasn't really a joke, not deep down. Lena got everything growing up. And I don't just mean love and praise, though she received those in overwhelming, incandescent waves. I mean actual, tangible, write this down on paper everything. A fully funded college trust that matured when she turned 18. A designer wardrobe with seasonal updates as if she were a walking magazine spread. A paid-for apartment near her university complete with monthly deposits labeled essentials. And when she graduated, my parents bought her a townhome, a pristine 3-bedroom with white shutters and a renovated kitchen, so she could start her adult life properly. Me, I pieced my life together like patchwork. I took night shifts at a gas station during college, slept through half my morning lectures, and biked 5 miles to campus through snowstorms because I couldn't afford parking. My coat was secondhand, my textbooks were missing chapters, and monthly deposits were something I learned other people got. I asked my mother once why Lena got a trust fund, and I didn't. Her response was soft, almost gentle, but it carved me open. Well, honey, we weren't sure you'd stick with college. We had to be strategic. Strategic. Like I was a bad investment she regretted taking a chance on. This wasn't about money, not entirely. It was about invisibility. About how the people who were supposed to love you the most can make you feel like you're a ghost haunting your own life. About the way my mother could look at Lena like she hung the stars and at me as if I were the cold draft sneaking under the door. About how Lena basked in that light and never once thought to pull me beside her. The difference with sisters, though, is that the cruelty isn't loud. It's soft, beautifully concealed, leisurely deniable. Lena was an expert at delicate domination. She spoke in honey, but every word had an edge. You're doing great, Riss. Honestly, for someone who didn't go to a top university, this is impressive. Or, you've always had your own style. It's unique. And those comments somehow always landed in front of my mother, who responded with her trademark, warm, adoring smile directed solely at Lena. My father wasn't around much after the divorce, drifting somewhere between half involved and fully absent. But even he once told me, you should stay close to your sister Marissa. She's going to do big things, might open some doors for you. I nodded, like it didn't gut me. So I did the only thing that ever made sense. I left. I moved out the moment I could afford it and started building something quietly, diligently, obsessively. No fanfare, no celebration, no parental cheering section, just determination and 2 college friends who believed in my ideas. We built a small company in a converted storage unit behind someone's boutique gym. First came small clients, then bigger ones. We adapted, shifted, expanded. We acquired competitor after competitor, and eventually those same co-founders handed me the keys to the company, literally and figuratively. You're our leader, they said. You're the only one who sees everything clearly. I became CEO at 29, the same age when my sister Lena, after years of jumping between marketing internships and creative sabbaticals, finally decided she should join the workforce. Fate, in all its dramatic irony, delivered the sweetest twist. 6 months ago, we acquired the boutique agency Lena worked at. She had no idea. Of course she didn't. Lena never looked beyond surface level. Meanwhile, I deliberately kept my name off internal subsidiary documents. I preferred to lead from the background where I had learned to survive my entire life, Lena talked about her job constantly, as if she were conquering the world. My agency is so innovative, she'd say. My director is obsessed with me. Or, we're doing huge things, Marissa. Major brands. I'm basically indispensable. She never realized she answered to a shell corporation I controlled. She bragged about her firm to me without realizing I had signed her paychecks that week. I didn't say a word, but silence doesn't last forever, not in families like mine. Especially not with Aunt Robin's retirement party looming. Aunt Robin was the only adult who ever really looked at me like I mattered. She taught me how to bake, how to sew a torn hem, how to patch drywall when I moved into my first apartment. She was warm, imperfect, and honest. When I heard Lena would be there, bringing her new boyfriend, some corporate type named Noah, who my mother already adored, I felt something twist inside me. I wanted to go. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove something. Maybe I wanted to be seen. Maybe I wanted the satisfaction of walking in wearing confidence instead of invisibility. The party was larger than I expected. White tents stretched across the backyard. String lights glowing like fireflies, music floating over the laughter of relatives I hadn't seen in years. I showed up alone in a fitted navy dress and low heels, the kind that made me feel protected rather than exposed. I brought a bottle of good bourbon and set it on the drinks table like a quiet offering. Aunt Robin hugged me tight, smelling like lavender and sawdust. "There's my girl," she said, squeezing my hand. "Didn't think you'd make it." I told her I wouldn't have missed it. For a little while, everything felt almost normal. My cousins laughed with me, reminiscing about childhood disasters like the time I accidentally stapled my dress hem to the carpet or when Lena cried during Monopoly and flipped the board. I ate barbecue ribs, sipped a beer, breathed a moment of peace. Then I saw them, my mother and Lena, standing near the rose bushes. My mother's hand rested on Lena's arm as Lena performed her life, gesturing, laughing, lightly glowing in the fading sun. I hesitated but approached them anyway. "Hi, Mom," I said. She blinked slow and mildly surprised. "Oh, Marissa, you came. I wasn't sure you'd... You know with how busy you always are." We talked about nothing, her garden, the weather, whether Evan and I were still together. I brushed off the topic lightly. Evan wasn't with me that night, but he was supportive in ways my family could never understand. But Lena saw my hesitation and smirked politely as if she'd caught me in a lie. She always had that talent. Then came the passive-aggressive volley. "Maris, have you finally found a job with stability? Something that doesn't require jumping around every few months? Mom says you're still doing that tech thing with apps." She clasped her hands sweetly. "That must be... fun." I didn't react. Couldn't. Wouldn't. There was too much history for words to fix. Lena swirled her wine like she owned the world. My mother nodded along proudly. The sun dipped lower. Music swelled. And I felt something inside me shift, align, click into place. Tonight's the night, I thought. Not to explode, not my style, but to stop shrinking, to stop folding myself into corners no one looked at. I didn't say anything yet. I simply watched them, Lena glowing, my mother adoring, and let the moment simmer. Because when everything finally broke open, it would not be quiet. The evening sun dipped lower as people gathered under the tent for speeches and toasts. The warm glow of lanterns mixed with murmured conversations, clinking glasses, and the faint sound of country music, Aunt Robin's favorite, floating across the backyard. On the surface, everything looked beautiful, cozy, nostalgic. But beneath it, I felt fissures forming hairline cracks in the facade of the family I had tried so hard to understand, even harder to impress. I drifted between small groups of relatives answering polite questions about work with vague phrases. It was almost amusing, everyone assumed. I was still in that undefined tech job, the one they could never bother to ask more about. I let them keep assuming. It was easier than explaining what I had built, or rather what I had built without them. I paused at the drink table where Noah, Lena's boyfriend, stood pouring himself sparkling water. He was tall, clean-cut, pleasant, in the undeniably bland way of men who grew up knowing they were comfortably likable. He smiled at me as if he'd rehearsed it. "You're Marissa, right? Lena's sister." It stung more than it should have that he said Lena first and me as an afterthought, like I was a footnote in my own family. "Yes," I said, "that's me." "I've heard a lot about you," he added. "Lena said you're kind of a free spirit, always doing your own thing." My jaw almost tightened, but I caught myself. Of course Lena had framed me that way. Free spirit. The euphemism for aimless, less successful, not quite measuring up. I simply nodded and walked away before the bitterness rose too far up my throat to hide. A few minutes later, people began herding themselves toward the projector area. The folding chairs were arranged in long rows facing a white bedsheet hung between two oak trees. Someone dimmed the backyard lights, and suddenly the crowd quieted, settling into that familiar hush of anticipation. "Come sit," my aunt called, patting a spot next to my mother. "We saved you a seat." Of course they had. I lowered myself into the metal folding chair, knees brushing against my mother's. She didn't look at me, or maybe she did, and chose not to show it. Hard to tell after a lifetime of learning her expressions like a distant weather pattern, predictable yet always disappointing. The slideshow began with a photo of Aunt Robin at 20, grinning widely with a wrench in hand. The crowd erupted in warm laughter. The next few slides were heartwarming family vacations, blurry birthday footage, Christmas mornings filled with matching pajamas, and too many tinsel garlands. I actually felt myself relaxing, shoulders softening, as nostalgia washed over me. But nostalgia isn't a soft thing when it has razor-sharp edges. It cuts without warning. The slideshow shifted into tribute segments for the younger generation, the legacy Aunt Robin had supposedly helped shape. First up was Lena, naturally. A photo of her as a baby in a pink onesie flashed across the sheet. Then Lena at 10 winning a medal with her hair in perfect ringlets. Lena at 16 posing dramatically on her dance team. Lena at her university's graduation cap in hand. Mother beaming beside her. Lena receiving the keys to her townhome. Lena with Mom at a leadership retreat. Lena at some industry gala. Slide after slide after slide. Soft chuckles floated through the audience. Someone behind me whispered, "She's always been destined for great things." I sat frozen, my pulse throbbing in my palms. Then came the next tribute cousins, Emily the nurse, Brian the firefighter in training, Ava, starting at State University. Their achievements displayed proudly one after another. And then the slideshow ended. The lights came back on. People clapped. I remained absolutely still. My heart didn't pound, it sank. Because it wasn't just an omission. It wasn't accidental. They didn't skip me. They forgot I existed. My mother turned to Lena and gave her arm a little affectionate squeeze. "Wasn't that sweet?" she said softly. Not a word, not a single glance in my direction. I stood up quietly and walked away, stepping through rows of chairs, as if moving through fog. The noise blurred the lights, smeared the air, thickened. I didn't remember crossing the yard or reaching the side garden, but suddenly I was there behind the shed, leaning against the rough wood, trying to breathe. My chest tightened, not in a dramatic way, just in a slow, crushing heaviness. Because in that moment I realized the truth I had been avoiding for years. I wasn't overlooked. I wasn't occasionally forgotten. I wasn't even undervalued. I was unnecessary to them. My existence had no narrative worth including. My accomplishments weren't just ignored, they were non-existent in the story they told themselves about our family. And something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not with fury. Quietly. Deeply. A fracture long overdue. After several minutes, I walked back to my car, got inside, put my hands on the steering wheel, and debated leaving. I even started the engine. The headlights glowed across the lawn. I could have driven away and never looked back. I could have chosen peace over this familiar emptiness. But then I remembered the way Lena had smiled at me earlier, sweet and condescending. The way Noah had called me a free spirit like I was harmless. The way my mother had watched the slideshow and seen a perfectly complete family without me in it. The way years of silence, small dismissals, and subtle cruelty had compacted into something sharp. So I turned off the engine. I stepped out, and I walked back into the party. The sky had deepened to a cool violet string lights, glowing like constellations overhead. People were gathering for toasts now. Aunt Robin stood at a makeshift podium holding a bottle of beer. The crowd quieted as she cleared her throat. But I wasn't listening anymore, because Lena, with impeccable timing, waltzed over to me, swirling her drink, wearing that effortless confidence that had always been her shield and weapon in equal measure. She glanced at me as if she owned the moment. "You okay, Maurice? You disappeared. Don't tell me the slideshow made you emotional." She giggled lightly. I mean, it was cute, right? My cousins nearby laughed politely, unsure if they were supposed to. A flicker of heat rose in me. Not rage. Not yet. Understanding. Pure, crystalline understanding. Lena didn't even know what she didn't know. She didn't know I was her boss. She didn't know I owned the company she bragged about constantly. She didn't know I had read every email of hers during the acquisition transition. She didn't know that all her arrogance rested on a foundation I had built. I smiled at her, not a pleasant smile, not entirely. "Careful," I said calmly, "or you might talk yourself into trouble." Lena blinked, surprised. "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Not here. Not while she still believed she was untouchable. A voice carried across the backyard. "Speech time," someone called. People turned their attention to Aunt Robin again. Laughter swelling, glasses raised. Beside me, Lena smoothed her hair, oblivious. My mother looked on proudly, her gaze anchored to the daughter she had always chosen. The golden daughter, the perfect one. I inhaled slow and steady, because I knew something they didn't. Tonight wouldn't end the way they thought. And when the first crack finally appeared, it wouldn't be subtle. The morning after the party felt like waking up inside a hollowed-out version of myself. Not hungover, there hadn't been enough alcohol for that, but drained in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. It was the quiet kind of emptiness, the kind that settles in your bones when you finally admitted something to yourself that you can never unknow. I sat at the edge of my bed, still wearing the dress from the night before, staring at the wall as the early sunlight crept through the blinds. The memory replayed in fragments the slideshow. Without me, Lena's glittering smile, my mother's proud hand resting on her shoulder, the quiet humiliation curling around the inside of my ribs like smoke. But then there was the other memory, the one that should have been satisfying, but instead left me feeling strangely hollow. When I told Lena in front of a handful of relatives that she should be careful unless she wanted to talk herself into trouble. Her confused expression had been priceless, but beneath my smirk there had been no real pleasure. The truth was that revelation wasn't meant to be a dramatic moment. It was a tremor, a hint of the fault line beneath her life, a warning of the shift that was already happening. But after everything, after all the little betrayals, the silent disappointments, the careless cruelty, they still didn't see me. Not even when I'd spoken up. Especially not my mother. The part that hurt wasn't that she hadn't defended me. It was that she hadn't even noticed she should have. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, snapping me out of the loop in my mind. A message from Evan, my boyfriend. Evan. "Hey, love. I didn't want to overwhelm you last night. How are you feeling? Want me to come over with breakfast?" I stared at the message for a long moment, the warmth of it settling into the cold places inside me. Evan had always been quietly consistent in a way I had never grown up with, but he also had his own complicated past, like his ex-girlfriend Talia, who still worked at a partner firm we collaborated with. She and Evan had a messy history, and though I trusted him, I couldn't help but tense any time her name came up. The universe had a way of pushing old wounds back into the spotlight at the worst possible moments. I typed back a simple response. I'm okay, just tired. Can we talk later?" He replied almost instantly. "Evan, anything you need." That was the thing about Evan, he never pushed. He let me set the pace even when he didn't understand it. But in the aftermath of the party, I didn't want comfort. I wanted clarity. I wanted distance from the noise. I needed silence to figure out who I was now that every illusion I'd kept about my family had finally shattered. For 3 days, I barely left the apartment. I didn't answer calls from work, ignored emails. I canceled meetings through my assistant with vague phrases about focusing on strategy development. I wasn't grieving the party. I was grieving the idea of my family I'd held on to for decades. The idea that maybe one day, if I worked hard enough, if I succeeded loudly enough, if I shined bright enough, they might turn and look at me with pride. I had been chasing something impossible. On the third night, rummaging through old digital folders I hadn't opened in years, I found a photo from childhood. I was 10, sitting cross-legged near a Christmas tree, holding up a Lego set with a grin so wide my cheeks were flushed. My sister Lena stood slightly behind me, holding a brand new gaming console perfectly centered in the frame. I had been blurred, out of focus, almost an afterthought. But I remembered that moment. I remembered being happy, truly happy, because I didn't know then that the camera had never been for me in the first place. Looking at that photo, I realized something with unnerving clarity. I had spent my entire adult life trying to get back into focus, trying to place myself in a frame that was never meant to include me. And maybe it was time to stop trying. The next morning, I got up early, showered, dressed, and walked into my office at 7:45 a.m., long before most of the team arrived. The quiet buzz of the building, the soft hum of the air conditioning, the faint smell of fresh carpet and coffee grounds, it felt like a reset. My sanctuary, my empire, the one place where I was not invisible. I brewed my own coffee and opened a blank document on my laptop. Not for a project, not for a client, for myself. First line, what now? Second line, grow this time for me. Instead of pouring my energy into proving something to people who didn't care, I focused on the people who did. My employees, my team, the junior associates who looked at me the way I had always wanted my mother to. With trust, with admiration, with respect. Over the next few weeks, everything shifted. Our European expansion project, something I had been overseeing from afar, became my priority. I flew to Berlin, met partners in person, toured potential offices, discussed strategy face to face. I started making decisions with intention rather than urgency. I mentored interns, coached new hires, and structured leadership tracks that made sense instead of catering to ego. And strangely, something beautiful began to happen. I started feeling lighter, like every step forward belonged only to me, not to Lena's shadow, not to my mother's disappointment, not to the muted expectations of extended family members who never asked questions beyond the surface. But peace, especially in families like mine, doesn't last. About a week after I returned from Berlin, my assistant poked her head into my office. Marissa HR just called. They said it's urgent. My pulse slowed, not sped up slowed. A strange calm settled over me. I'll take it, I said. The HR director's voice crackled through the speakerphone. Marissa, I'm sorry to bother you, but we just received a formal complaint from an employee at Branded West Media. Branded West, Lena's company. Well, my company now. The director continued. The employee claims you ambushed her at a family event and created a hostile work environment. She's threatening legal action unless we reassign her immediately. I sat back in my chair, letting the words hang in the air. Of course, Lena had filed an HR complaint. Not because she was genuinely upset, but because she thought she could weaponize the company she believed she belonged to against me. What she didn't realize, what she had never realized, was that I wasn't her colleague. I was her boss, and she had just made her biggest mistake. Thank you, I told the HR director, my voice steady. Let me handle this personally. The director hesitated. Should we open a case file? No, I said, not yet, because this wasn't anger. This was stillness. The kind of stillness that comes right before a storm. And I knew with a clarity I had never felt before that it was time to stop running from the truth and time for Lena to finally face it. There's a moment right before a storm breaks when everything goes unnervingly still. The air tightening, the wind holding its breath, the sky turning that eerie shade of gray that signals something mighty is coming. That was exactly how it felt the moment I hung up the HR call about Lena's complaint. I didn't feel fear or rage or indignation. I felt clarity. For the first time in my life, my sister had placed herself squarely in my domain, on my turf, on my terms, and she had no idea she'd done it. Her entire complaint read like some melodramatic performance piece ambushed at a family party. Emotional distress, professional sabotage. It would almost be impressive if it wasn't so predictable. Lena always struck when she thought she had the upper hand. She'd been raised to believe she always had the upper hand. But she didn't understand the world she'd wandered into. And she didn't understand the woman I had become. I opened my laptop and began digging not out of spite, but out of necessity. If she wanted a formal complaint, then I wanted to know exactly what kind of employee she had been since the acquisition. I hadn't looked closely before. I hadn't needed to. But this time I pulled up her internal emails, project involvement KPIs, and performance notes left behind by her previous managers. What I found wasn't shocking. It was disappointingly familiar. Lena had talked her way into a strategic analyst role at Branded West, a position with an impressive title, but almost no meaningful responsibilities. Her emails were filled with corporate jargon buzzwords, strung together like she was trying to summon credibility through sheer vocabulary. Conceptual synergy, alignment, holistic demographic leveraging, macro-strategic narrative repositioning. None of it meant anything. Most managers assigned her tasks that required little follow-through because the things she volunteered for rarely produced results. But beneath the fluff, there were real problems. She'd been forwarding client communication threads to personal contacts. She had set up meetings with brand partners under a self-appointed title of Strategic Executive Liaison, a title that didn't exist anywhere in our organization. She'd pitched campaigns without approval, signed attendance sheets for events she never attended, and best of all, she'd copied entire original strategy memos from a marketing blog and passed them off as her own. I took screenshots, saved threads, and compiled a timeline. Before long, a clean folder on my desktop labeled Griffin Lena Internal Audit began to take shape. But I wasn't going to act alone, so I called Dina, my COO. If I was the quiet architect of the company, Dana was its scalpel, precise, surgical, and utterly unsentimental. When she appeared in my office doorway, arms crossed, dark hair, pulled into a sharp bun, I knew she was already prepared for whatever I had to say. "She filed a complaint," Dana asked, lowering herself into the chair across from me. "She did," I said, sliding my laptop forward. "And she's given us exactly what we needed." Dana clicked through the evidence. She didn't whistle, but her eyebrows rose quiet praise from a woman whose emotional spectrum rarely changed. "She's a liability," Dina concluded simply. "We could terminate immediately." "We could," I said. "But I don't want her walking out believing this is about the party, or the family, or some petty power trip." I folded my hands. I want her to understand she did this to herself. A slow smile crept across Dina's face. "So you want her to feel the fall?" "No," I corrected softly. "I want her to face the truth." Lena had been shielded her entire life. If she failed, someone caught her. If she stumbled, someone steadied her. If she messed up, someone else took the damage. Now, for the first time, she was standing on her own, and she had no idea the ground beneath her was rotting from her own choices. "Then we start clean," Dana said, leaning back. "Company-wide process audit, standard restructuring, reassign her accounts quietly, breach nothing, flag everything." I nodded. No demotions yet. Just isolation. No projects, no client contact, no responsibility. "This might take her a while to notice," Dina mused. "That's fine," I replied. She's always been slow to notice the things that matter. Over the next several days, my instructions moved through the managerial chain in careful, neutral language. Project managers reassigned her responsibilities. Account directors redirected questions away from her. Meetings she once attended were temporarily moved. She received auto-replies like, "This is being handled by our core strategy team, thank you." Or "In review. No need for additional input." By the end of the week, her calendar was nearly empty. The silence around her was intentional, surgical. Lena had always needed an audience to thrive. Without one, she would begin to suffocate. While the internal redirection took root, I began preparing what I privately and only half-jokingly called the dossier. I compiled every questionable action she'd taken since joining the firm. It wasn't personal. It wasn't embellished. It was clean, factual, chronological, and devastating. 2 days later, when my grandfather called, asking if I could meet him for coffee, I hesitated. I knew he knew something was brewing. He'd always had that uncanny ability to sense the quiet storms beneath people's skins. So I met him at the small diner near his house, the one with the peeling wallpaper and the waitress who gave him extra pie slices for free. He said little at first, stirring sugar into coffee as he studied me. "You look steady," he finally said. "I feel steady," I replied. He nodded, eyes softening. "That party, something shifted." "Something broke," I corrected. "Sometimes things have to break to show what was weak in the first place." His voice carried no anger, no judgment. Just truth, plain and firm. "Am I doing the right thing?" I asked. He set his spoon down and leaned back. "Let me ask you this. If Lena were anyone else, any other employee, would you treat her differently?" "No." "Then the answer's simple. Family isn't a shield." He paused. "And you're not a doormat anymore." I exhaled. "I just need her to understand. Really understand." "She will," he said. "But it won't feel like you think it will." And he was right. The mediation meeting came fast. Thursday morning, a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Lena arrived 5 minutes late wearing a blazer that cost more than her monthly rent and a smile that was painfully performative. She sat across from me, crossing her legs like she was in control of the room. "Maurice," she said softly, "I'm glad we're resolving this properly. Mom said it's not healthy to let resentment build." I almost laughed. Not because she was wrong, resentment is poison, but because the line sounded like something she'd rehearsed in a mirror. HR opened the meeting with practice neutrality. "We're here to address the concerns raised by Lena regarding workplace tension and to provide space for clarification." I didn't speak. Not at first. I simply slid the folder across the table. Lena's fingers hesitated before touching it. She opened it, flipped a page, then another, and another. As she read, her expression shifted from confusion to discomfort, to panic. What is all this?" she whispered. "Your performance record," I said. "Reviewed, verified, and documented." "This isn't fair," she snapped louder now. "These are misunderstandings. People misunderstood my role." "No," I corrected. "You misunderstood your role. Or you misrepresented it." Her breath quickened. "This is because of the party, isn't it? Because I said something that upset you. Because, Mom—" "This is because you violated policy," I said calmly. "Repeatedly, consistently, and without accountability." She shot up from her chair, face flushed. "You think you're better than me now because you got lucky? Because you're what, some kind of boss?" I stood too, not aggressively, just firmly. "I'm your superior. And this isn't about being better. It's about being responsible, something you've never learned to be." She stared at me, trembling, caught between rage and disbelief. HR cleared her throat. "Given the severity of these issues, we'll be initiating next steps. Lena, you will need to meet with legal regarding potential termination options." My sister's voice cracked. Termination. Her eyes weren't angry now. They were afraid. "I never wanted this to be a war," I said quietly. "But you started one the moment you weaponized the company against me." Silence stretched across the table. Lena looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. And maybe she didn't. I wasn't the girl in the blurred photo anymore. I wasn't the afterthought. I wasn't the extra. I was the storm she never saw coming. The day after Lena's mediation meeting felt uncannily quiet at the office, the kind of quiet that vibrates beneath the surface, humming with things unsaid. She had taken personal leave almost immediately, of course she had. Lena never did well when the spotlight dimmed. She needed applause like oxygen, and losing control of the narrative suffocated her. I heard through back channels that she had already begun crafting her version of events. She'd been ambushed, misunderstood, singled out. She even posted a dramatic Instagram story of a half-empty wine glass and a caption that read, "Sometimes people fear your shine." It would have been funny if it hadn't been so painfully predictable. But I didn't let her theatrics derail me. I had work to do, real work, not the glossy projection Lena mistook for ambition. I met with legal. We reviewed her contract. We confirmed her violations. We ensured every step was airtight. And then we sent her a formal notice she could either resign quietly and take a minimal severance, or she could contest the findings and risk a full investigation into her conduct. She resigned the next day. Her letter was overly sweet, dripping with forced professionalism and false gratitude. "I'm grateful for the opportunity," she wrote. "I look forward to new horizons." She even added a line hoping for continued mutual respect between departments, as if pretending we were equals would somehow soften the blow. Dana nearly choked on her coffee laughing at that. We accepted her resignation, archived the letter, and moved on. Internally, I crafted a brief announcement. One of our strategic hires has chosen to pursue other opportunities. No drama, no gloating, no details. Clean, quiet, controlled. But revenge, true revenge, isn't in the firing. It's in the clarity, the shift in power, the rearrangement of a story after decades of imbalance. And I knew I wasn't done yet. Not until my family understood, not the small details, not the drama, but the truth. So I planned a dinner, a formal one. I booked the private rooftop dining room at Luma, one of the most elegant restaurants in the city, with its glass walls and warm golden lighting that made everyone seated beneath them look softer, more vulnerable. I sent invitations to everyone, my mother, my grandfather, aunts, uncles, cousins, and yes, even Lena. I knew she wouldn't come. But the invitation wasn't for her attendance. It was for the principal. The night arrived crisp and windswept. The view stretched across the city skyline like a lit mosaic. People filed into the room dressed in their best. They were confused, curious, tense. My mother arrived in a pearl necklace she usually reserved for weddings. My grandfather wore the same weathered suit jacket he'd worn to every milestone event for as long as I could remember. When everyone was seated, the servers poured wine and set down appetizers. Conversations buzzed in strange pockets of politeness, the kind that form when people don't yet understand why they've been summoned. I stood slowly raising my glass. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "It means more than you know." They quieted, forks stilled, eyes lifted. "I want to share something tonight. Something most of you didn't know, and perhaps something you've never thought to ask." My mother's expression tightened, a subtle instinctive bracing. "My name is Jessie Griffin," I continued, "and for the past 2 years, I've been the CEO of Griffin Bridge Ventures." Gasps. Murmurs. A few stunned looks from cousins who had assumed my job was cute tech stuff with apps, as Lena liked to phrase it. I went on. In the last 4 years, our company has grown from 3 people in a garage to over 200 employees, 5 regional offices, and 8 acquisitions. Someone whispered 8. I nodded. And one of the firms we acquired 6 months ago was Branded West Media. My mother blinked, eyes darting back and forth in confusion. And what many of you didn't know, I added, is that Lena was one of their employees, which means that until last week she worked under a chain of management that ultimately reported to me. Silence spread across the room like ink on water. After reviewing her professional conduct, I said calmly, she chose to resign. My mother's wine glass trembled slightly in her hand. She tried to speak but couldn't. My aunts exchanged looks of disbelief. My grandfather watched me with soft eyes, pride etched into the lines of his face. I sat back down. No gloating, no theatrics. Just truth, clean, sharp, final. After dinner, people approached me one by one. Some apologized for never asking more about my life. Others simply said they were proud. My grandfather hugged me, long and firm. But my mother, she lingered. When the room finally emptied, she approached me near the elevator. For a moment, she looked older than I had ever seen her, like decades of patterns had cracked all at once. I didn't know, she said softly. I know, I replied. You should have told me. No, I said gently. You should have asked. She looked down at her hands, twisting the pearls at her throat. Lena. Her voice trembled. She's struggling. This broke something in her. I didn't soften. Not this time. Then maybe I said steadily, it's time she learns what struggle feels like. My mother flinched, barely noticeable but undeniable. I let the silence sit between us. Because love given out of habit is not love worth chasing. Validation earned through pain is not validation, it's debt. And I was done being indebted to people who never saw me. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Our company expanded into new regions. I hired a young strategist, one of our interns, bright and thoughtful. We developed new culture standards, less ego, more transparency. I started a mentorship program for young women in business, teaching them all the things I had taught myself in the dark. Evan became a steady presence again. Not the soft comfort I had once sought, but a partner, steady, grounded, patient. His ex, Talia, lingered at the edges of our professional world from time to time, but it no longer scraped at my insecurities like it once had. I had outgrown the version of myself who feared losing what she had. Because truthfully, the revenge that mattered most wasn't about Lena at all. It was about reclaiming myself. 6 months after the dinner, I sat on my grandfather's porch as the breeze moved through the trees. He sipped his coffee, watching me the way he always did, like he was seeing something beyond the present. You did it, he said simply. I nodded, finally. So what now, he asked. I looked toward the horizon, the sky calm, the world steady, my heartbeat, no longer heavy with old wounds. Now I said I build a life that has nothing to do with them. He smiled. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt free.